There we go. So a few introductions. I'm Sarah Perez. I'm one of the assistant neurology professors here at Tulane. I specialize in movement disorders. With us today, we have Jan Grimes and her husband, care partner, Bill Grimes. Very pleased to have them with us today. So Jan is a professional pianist and served as a professional pianist in residence at LSU School of Music for over 30 years. She recently retired in 2016? 17. While she was at LSU, she performed and accompanied over 700 student performers, myself included, in 2004. And accompanied all the professors and people traveling in here, professionals. She's performed all around the world, including Kennedy Center and Carnegie Hall. Very accomplished and talented woman. She's very humble, very, very humble though. And then her husband, Bill, was a professor of jazz studies at LSU. And for over 35 years, he was in charge of the jazz program at LSU. And he is our bassist and composer extraordinaire, and all of the pieces you'll hear us play today were arranged for us by him. So thank y'all for coming this afternoon. Disclosures are, we call ourselves Full Circle. This was given to us by a precious lady at a Parkinson's support group meeting who drew this circle for us because of our relationship before and how we've come full circle now. I have the privilege of being Jan's neurologist. And so we reunited back in 2017 in a Parkinson's conference, and we've been performing and speaking since that time, mainly to Parkinson's support groups, but then there's a variety of other organizations we perform for, Metairie Music Club, Women in Spirit in Baton Rouge, and then some of our bigger gigs, if you will, LSU Science Cafe in 2019. The picture up at the top with me being super pregnant back then. It's not the same baby, it's a different baby. I think I was only 7.5 months pregnant there, but a full 8 months now pregnant. So, and then at the bottom there was our most recent gig with the Davis Phinney Foundation. Excuse me. So it was our first international gig where it was a Zoom over the holidays. So our next venture will be, instead of international, will be intergalactic, right? So that'll be our next venture after this one. But all right. So we're going to be talking about Parkinson's today and talking about a little bit creativity and resilience. We're going to share our Parkinson's story. Jan will share a little bit about her Parkinson's journey, a little bit about creativity in Parkinson's and how creativity can improve the lives on a practical level, and then cultivating resilience, not only in Parkinson's, but then also medical training and careers. So without further ado, I was going to invite Jan to tell us a little bit about her diagnosis story.
Can you all hear me all right if I do that? Okay. Okay, it was late in the year 2005, and we in Louisiana had all suffered through Katrina. I personally had had a very stressful year with performances that had really left me exhausted. It was then that I realized the tremor that I had in my left thumb was becoming a bit more noticeable. I was having difficulties at the keyboard. My left hand couldn't maintain repetitive passages like tremolos, trills, quickly repeated chords or octaves, and I knew something just wasn't right. Had no pain, it just wasn't right. After seeing a local neurologist several times and having many tests that turned up nothing, I decided to travel out of state and see someone else, a movement disorder specialist, who perhaps could tell me what I thought I wanted to hear, which was namely that I was overworked and needed a vacation. Well, that was not to be. When I arrived at the specialist's office, the first thing he asked me to do was walk to the corner of the room and back. I strode with confidence and returned to the chair where he invited me to sit, and he said, just very matter-of-factly, I think you have Parkinsonism. He arrived at this conclusion because my left hand did not swing as much as my right hand when I walked. My immediate reaction was panic, and I began to cry. He tried to assure me by telling me that he had thought I was going to be just another one of those prima donnas who came into his office and was just stressed. And he said, no, you really have something. I thought, great. He asked me if I still put on my eye makeup by myself. This was back in 2006. You know, it's been 16 years and I still do it myself. But the real kicker was his parting advice to me when he said, come back when you need a disability letter, because I write a really good one. Really had made me feel great. As unhappy as I was to have received this diagnosis, I realized that there have been many more people who have suffered and succumbed with Parkinson's. And with that in mind, we'd like to dedicate this next piece to all of those who have been in that circumstance. The piece is called Litany by Franz Schubert, and although it wasn't discovered until after his death, it's a beautiful melody, and it's a musical salve for the soul, meaning all souls rest in peace. Short and sweet.
Just a comment. Many medical trainees in here, and I often have to remind myself, we get into the routine as physicians to give diagnosis on a regular basis. You don't really think about it because it becomes kind of routine, but you can imagine how devastating someone, a diagnosis of Parkinson's or any kind of neurological condition can be for somebody. And I often have to remind myself, it's not only what you say, but how you say it and how you build up for it. I became very conscientious about it actually when rounding on post-cardiac arrest patients and thinking, okay, I'm going to go into the room with this family and tell them that their loved ones basically passed away, and that what I say will echo in their minds, possibly for the rest of their lives. So you could see how kind of insensitive perhaps this physician was with Jan, but it's just a thought that even things that seem routine to you, you might think about before going in how you're going to say things to people, because it'll matter and they'll remember it forever. So with the new diagnosis of Parkinson's, it seems like you had some choices to make and some life changes and
Huge changes. Yes.
so we'll just go into a little bit about how your life changed since then.
Well, obviously, excuse me. Obviously, I was thrown for a loop. I felt like I was watching somebody else get this news. It couldn't possibly be me. But I was faced with losing my ability to play the piano, among many other things. And I wasn't going to be Jan the pianist anymore. That's the way a lot of people knew me, and I identified, of course, as a pianist. So then was, well, who am I? What was I going to do after this? Determined to go on, I returned to LSU to continue my teaching and playing duties, and I did so for 11 years before retiring in 2017. I continued to do a lot of reading about PD because by now I had accepted the diagnosis, but with this caveat. I may have PD, but PD does not have me. So my days after my retirement are filled with all these activities that I try to make the day the best I can make it for myself and for everybody else. I start the day with exercise and a good attitude. And after breakfast, I almost always play the piano for maybe half an hour, it depends. And what's really interesting, sometimes I get so wrapped up in playing the piano that I will go past my next, excuse me, dosage time. And, but I don't feel any compromise in my abilities because I was just, I guess, living on the dopamine I was creating playing the piano. So, and every day I tried, if I went out somewhere, I tried to educate somebody about Parkinson's because you'd be amazed how little they know, and they look at you like you're from another planet when you walk funny or something like that. So I'm going to relate a very short story to you quickly about stopping at the dollar store. I was on my way home and I just had to have something from the dollar store. I thought, it's just going to take a minute. Of course, a minute for a Parkinson's person is 5 minutes. So I managed to get to the door of the store and I saw a woman coming. I said, oh, would you mind holding the door while I have this card? I have Parkinson's and I'm moving just a little slowly. Oh, she got all excited, and opened the door for me. She said, let me help you. I said, I don't need any help. I just need one thing. I'm fine. Oh, no, let me help you. Well, she helped me. And along the way, she said, do you have any children? I said, yes, I have 2 sons, but they're grown and out of the house. Well, do you have a husband? Yes, I have a husband. We're going to have lunch as soon as I get home. Does he know you're out? Just like that. Well, so, Parkinson's, it's called a disease, but it's really more of a condition that we try to manage and live with. So, in fact, I read recently that Parkinson's brings up images in the public that don't really accurately fit us. So as somebody said, it's an inconvenience more than a disease, and it's a big inconvenience, frankly. This also, the article I am referring to also suggested that it was time to take Parkinson's off its pedestal and not capitalize it anymore. That might be sacrilege, I'm not sure, but I'm in favor of that. However, in the redefinition process of myself, I realized I'm a multifaceted person, and I gave up things during my tenure at LSU because I didn't have time for them. So I went back to my church job, playing the organ and piano at church, and I took time for activities I once loved, which especially is sewing. I set up my sewing room, I call it my she shed, as it was lots of years ago, and I started making something called Japanese knot bags. I don't know if any of you know it, but I make these and have given away almost 100 of them to women who have trouble with buckles, zippers, buttons on their bags. But it's a simple bag with 2 loops, and the knot is formed by that. And I make them in all different sizes and shapes. I also make kitchen boas. Now, most of us think of the flashy feather boa, but this is a scarf, basically, made out of cotton fabric with a kitchen towel cut into it. So, when you're in the kitchen, you've always got a towel handy for pots, scrubbing, wiping your brow, whatever. So I make those, and I just have a blast. I have with a friend of mine who gave me lots of remnants from his upholstery store. I had been blessed to be able to make a lot of them. And with my free time, I also am an ambassador for the Davis Finney Foundation. That is a very rewarding activity for me because people who have just recently been diagnosed with Parkinson's often contact me, and I'll get together with them to have coffee and tell them about my experience. And they usually have a lot of questions that I say, when you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person. So they can't really use me as a guidepost, but we can certainly talk and I can try to alleviate some of their fears. The last thing I did was I decided in order to live my life more stress-free, I had to make some adjustments and distill my relationships and activities. I discarded acquaintances and activities that were toxic or downers. And I kept only those friendships and actions that enriched my soul. I didn't want anything to interfere with my efforts to live in the present and to live well. Even though I did make these adjustments, that's not to say that I don't miss the automaticity of my life before the diagnosis and occasionally grieve for what was lost. But I believe everyone can relate to grieving what was lost from the pandemic to the major hurricanes that we've suffered. And the loss for people with Parkinson's is like a sliding slope. And going to the doctor's office, it can look like a living timeline. You see all levels of neurologic disease. And at this point, I would like to read to you a poem by Robin Morgan. Robin is a poet, former editor of Elle magazine, feminist, and she has Parkinson's. This is from a set of 4 poems, and this is called No Signs of Struggle. Growing small requires enormity of will. Just sitting still in the doctor's waiting room, watching the future shuffle in and out, watching it stoop, stare at you while you try not to look. Rare is an exchange, a smile of brief, wry recognition. You are the new kid on the block. Everyone here was you once. You are still learning that growing small requires a largeness of spirit you can't fit into yet. Acceptance of irritating help from those who love you, giving way and over, but not up. You've swallowed hard the contents of the drink me bottle and felt yourself shrink. Now familiar furniture looms, floors tilt, and doorknobs yield only when wrestled around with both hands. It demands colossal patience, all this growing small. Your diminished sleep at night, your handwriting, your voice, your height. You are more the incredible shrinking woman than the Buddhist mystic, serene, making do with less. Less is not always more. Yet in this emptying space, space glimmers, becomes visible. Here is a place behind the eyes of those accustomed by what some would call diminishment. It is a place of merciless poetry, a gift of presence previously ignored, drowned in the daily clutter. Here, every gesture needs intention, is alive with consciousness. Nothing is automatic. You can spot it in the provocation of a button, an arm poking at a sleeve, a balancing act at a nighttime curb while negotiating the dark. Feats of such modest valor, who would suspect them to be exercises in an intimate, fierce discipline, a metaphysics of being relentlessly aware? Such understated power here in these tottering dancers who exert stupendous efforts on tasks most view as insignificant. Such quiet beauty here in these my soft voiced, stiff-limbed people. Such resolve masked by each placid face. There's immensity required in growing small, so bent on such unbending grace. So, speaking of loss, but we're back. Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans? Oh, sorry.
Need my projector here, voice projector. So moving on to a slightly different topic, very interesting topic, actually, creativity and Parkinson's. So some of my patients have told me since getting the diagnosis of Parkinson's, they've had this awakening of creativity that they didn't have before pre-diagnosis. And I think Jan has had some creative, she's a very creative person anyway, but she's taken up poetry now, is really quite good at it. Of course, creations with her sewing, but I have another Parkinson's patient that has her new business making, I think she says sweets and treats, bath bombs, candies. But so you look up and you can find literature on this, actually, creativity awakening in Parkinson's. So I've pulled a couple of just some abstracts just from PubMed. This is something that other people have noted too. So the awakening of artistic creativity in Parkinson's. And so basically it's seen in people who have Parkinson's and who are on dopamine replacement therapy. So these are just kind of some observations. Creativity, brain, and art, biological and neurological considerations. Again, thinking about creativity in the brain and Parkinson's. A couple of these. So this one here is trying to get at, so there's a thought that maybe the creativity is kind of a sign of impulse control issue, but this paper measured impulse control issue and creativity and didn't find that they correlated with each other, that there is actually an increase in creativity that not necessarily due to impulse control issues. And so one term they used here was something called latent inhibition. And we do have a psychologist with us today. So if I misspeak, Alex, please pipe in and say, that's wrong. That's wrong, Perez, here. This is what this really means. But one thing they were talking about in this paper is a reduction of latent inhibition, which it's a function of the frontal lobe to cancel out things that are familiar. So you're in your house, you're watching TV, you're not really paying attention to your curtains or your floor because it's all very familiar to you. So you can focus your attention on one thing. But where they find in Parkinson's and actually creative individuals is that they really don't have this filter. So they're constantly taking everything in all at once. So a combination of having that filter removed and being able to take in all the information all the time, that with a pairing of increased drive can lead to this creativity. And it's interesting just looking at more about latent inhibition. They find it in the most creative persons. And one interesting article I read was you can have someone who has this condition, and if they have like a brilliant mind and they could take in all the information, they're creative geniuses. But if you have someone who's, can't take it all in, they might have psychosis or schizophrenia or something like that. And if I've known quite a few brilliant artists and musicians, and the best ones are always just a little bit different, right? If you know anybody, it's like that, right? I mean, not them, but still, they're just a little bit different. And you're talking to them, you have the most amazing, diverse, crazy conversations. Like, wow, this person is nuts. No, they're brilliant. But anyway, it's just a little, I was like, oh, there's a name for this. There's a scientific name for this that I recognize with other people. Anyway, so this interesting article I found on the internet kind of broke it down in Parkinson's about what creates this artistic spark. And of the surveys and papers they looked at, they said up to 20% of people with Parkinson's will have this awakening of creativity and art. And what they proposed, again, is that you treat the motor Parkinson's with dopamine replacement therapy. Well, so the motor system's reduced, you replete it with dopamine. Well, other systems are intact, like the mesolimbic cortex is intact. And so when you add dopamine to treat motor, you're oversaturating other networks that drive behavior and reward. And so when you drive the mesolimbic circuit, you have increased associations, idea generation, motivation, and then so there's an increase in new associations. There's increased reward for making art. You're more engaged and more productive. And people who were artists before noted that they were better artists. So this is due to the dopamine receptors in this network. Combine that with what we know about just reduced frontal cortex activity, which also can be seen in Parkinson's, can also be seen in pregnant individuals, can also be seen in as people age, people lose their filters and become more fun, that sort of thing. Post-call, things are a little bit more fun. It's because your frontal lobes aren't working as well. And so the frontal lobe dysfunction will allow you to be more open. That with the drive is how they think that creativity works. And it's very interesting that this has come up from Parkinson's. We're learning more and more just about creativity in general and how it's generated from the brain. So I thought that was pretty neat. There are several organizations that are looking more into this. This is a European organization, the EPDA. And there's projects relating to Parkinson's and creativity, not only how creativity and art helps Parkinson's patients, but then how is creativity generated in general for everyone else. So this is one that's from the US. So there's NeuroArts Blueprint. And so it's a partnership between Johns Hopkins and the Aspen Institute. And so they're looking to strengthen, standardize, and propel the emerging field neuroarts. So they're doing translational science to measure ways art can change the brain and the body for the better. So this is a little snippet of their website and an emerging field called neuroaesthetics, which, I'm working out up here. I was a music major. I think it's awesome playing music with Jan. It's like surreal, like my two past lives coming together, neuroscience and art. And so there's a whole emerging field called neuroaesthetics, where it's neurology and art to see how we can unlock human brains, behavior, that sort of thing. So I thought that was really neat. So going off into another kind of tangent on creativity and Parkinson's, there's creative ways that Jan and Bill have done in their lives to kind of overcome the minor inconveniences, as it's called, of Parkinson's. And so we just threw up a few of their hacks, if you will, so ways to get around some of the issues one might have. So I'll just kind of, I don't know if we want to pass it back and forth here. Here, I'll just give you this.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So just a few things about.
Yes, well, the rollator, I never walked around the house with it empty. It was either carrying dirty laundry to the laundry room, clean away from, coffee to my husband, whatever, but it was my cart. Made it a multi-purpose thing.
We're not saying do any of these things or tell your patients to do any of these things, especially
it's just what I
with
did.
this, the hot coffee on the walker tray.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm lucky to have a carpenter for a husband as well as a great musician. And so he made me a couple of little ramps to and from the different floor heights, as well as taping down the edge of one of our big rugs. Most of the rugs are gone now, but that one particular one had to stay. So we used some orange tape. Yeah, and there's, oh, this is interesting. On the right-hand side, he made me a frame into which my sewing machine pedal fits so that when my foot's on it, I can't push it around because it's locked into its parking place, which is great. And then on the left-hand side, you see my sewing machine chair. I sometimes have dyskinesia. It's a drag, but I don't today. Feels great. But I use this. It's something for a rug, underneath a rug, so it doesn't slip, you know. And if you sit on this, you won't slip off your stool or off the piano bench. That can be embarrassing. And while I have it here, that's a silicone version of the same thing. I have these little like clothespin clips that I use for sewing, but they're really great in restaurants because I can clip my napkin to my blouse or dress and not worry about it falling on the floor because you get tired of picking it up.
Dyskinesia hacks.
Yeah, dyskinesia hacks. I have one other dyskinesia hack while we're at it. And this is, if I'm dancing under the piano, you know, my legs are going everywhere, I just tie them together. They can still play the pedal, but they're not going to go splaying out. Oh, non-slip in the bathroom, handlebars. Now, on the left-hand side is my fingernail clipper. I have a difficult time with that slippery chrome slipping out of my grip, and I can't clip my fingernails very easily. So I wrapped it with bandage tape, white bandage tape. And so now it grips. You know, I've got something to which I can grip.
I mean, this isn't a creative hack, but it's really helpful. The little pill thing.
Oh, the pill thing, yes, yes. And on the right-hand side is a hair blow dryer. It's like a microphone stand that you set on the countertop in the bathroom and you clamp your blower to the top, and then you can just sit under it and, you know, you don't have to be doing the two-handed coordination bit. That unfortunately has died, but that was my garden move around. An apron with everything I need to go around the house with, you know, snippers for plants, a cell phone, house key, things like that. Those are the buttonless bags, again, the Japanese knot bags. And clips. Oh yes, the button. Now that is a bona fide device. I don't know if you all have seen it, but it's a button assist. But I have found that the same thing works just as well, and it's a hairpin, a simple hairpin. A bobby pin, right. Of course, satin sleepwear makes it easier to roll around in bed and to get in and out, but don't do satin sheets and satin pajamas. That's too
Practical
much.
advice.
Overkill.
I'll say a little bit about this. So this young woman made these shirts for her husband. Her husband was a college football coach. And one night after the game, he couldn't get his shirt unbuttoned. He has Parkinson's. He was mortified. So she created these magnet shirts that are amazing. They're very nice, tailored dress shirts, but they're magnets instead of the buttons. But it looks very convincing. But all right, so just a little bit more make it work moments for walking. So this is a big part of Parkinson's for so many people. It's a really hard problem to have is freezing of gait. It's just whenever your feet get stuck to the ground, it's just with walking, namely in tight spaces through doorways. And people can go up and down stairs fine, they can drive fine, it's just walking. And so this is an invention someone made where she noticed her grandpa could walk up and down stairs, but couldn't walk through the house. So she made a mat that looks like a staircase and he could walk just fine on that. So visual cues. These are other devices. You can unfreeze by having an outside cue. There's a cane that vibrates. That young lady made that. And of course, there's laser pointers. People can point and step over on the floor. That's on a shoe. I've not seen anyone with that, but other cues. There was a gentleman who he loved chocolate and he would freeze through every doorway. And so what he did in his house, he would put a jar full of chocolates on the other side of the door. And so he'd come up to the door and freeze and think, there's a chocolate on the other side of this door, and he could unfreeze. Very interesting. And then there was a gentleman who would keep a bouncy ball in his pocket, get stuck, take his bouncy ball out, bounce it, take that next step to go. So very creative. And here's some of Jan's freezing hacks.
Yes, I always found it helpful to plan my next step. And I loved carpet with geometric designs in it because I could aim for a joint or a line. Also, I imagine stairs at times. And when I do that, I can walk better. As far as the freezing, I had a couple of embarrassing moments at parties. You know, when you get in a crowd, it's difficult to maneuver. And so I was frozen at one point and I turned to somebody and started a conversation as if I had planned it. That, however, is my husband offering a foot. That worked for a long time for us. He would place his foot in front of my foot like that, and I would just automatically step over it. It was great. Lots more walking sideways, alternating the walker with the cane, verbal cues, stopping and resetting. Sometimes I just stop, get my weight back on my heels, take a big breath, and then I can start walking again. So this is, as I said, when nothing seems to help and you're in a group of people, just start talking to someone as if you had planned it and have a good visit with that person. Okay.
So the ultimate mobility hack is exercise, biking, anything that gets people up and moving, and then also dancing, including tango.
Actually, Bill and I took tango lessons for quite a while, and until my knee replacement, was able to do pretty well. And we had the best time doing it. It was just really so much fun. But so we're going to play a little tango for you. Tango de la Moza de Noza.
This is actually an adaptation I made for this. Jan played this piece on her graduate recital, and it was a beautiful waltz. And I thought, wow, what would this be like if we adapted it into a tango? So this is just an adaptation of Ginastera's waltz.
our next topic, resilience, which I read with the subtitle, the difference between doing well and not doing well. Thank you. So I would say that Jan's a pretty resilient individual. She's lived gracefully, Parkinson's for over 16 years, highly functioning, beautiful person, lots of contributions. Anyway, she's wonderful. So resilience in health and illness. So we've all had patients that have similar medical issues, similar socioeconomic backgrounds, and someone will do well and someone will not do well. So what is it that makes someone do well? And this is something that's of growing interest, is resilience. So what is resilience? I'll just read what this article said, because I thought it was very good. Resilient individuals tend to be optimistic, have a tendency to see everything as a useful experience, focus on personal strengths and qualities, use constructive criticism, develop close relationships with others, and have developed social skills. They're emotionally conscious. Good resilience aggravates and prevents the onset of disease, provides good health, facilitates and accelerates healing, and provides productive life and a sense of well-being despite a chronic condition or illness. So talking about this and kind of applying it not only to a chronic medical condition, but then thinking about our high performance jobs, especially with regard to the growing burnout and whatnot that we have in our field and within medical training. So there's a growing body of literature concerning resilience in medical training as well. And what this article said is very similar to the other one that we just looked at. So people who are resilient, they have skills like self-efficacy, self-control, ability to engage, support, and help, learning from their difficulties, and persistence despite blocks to progress. So these are all recognized as qualities that are important in clinical leaders. And I think there was a resident the other day who, she's a very resilient individual. I won't say her name, but you'll be able to guess who it is, co-residents. I think she got 5 stroke transfers in the last 2 hours of her shift, like from 5P to 7P. And she said afterwards, she didn't know how she was going to do it, but she continued on. She's like, I'm so grateful for the experience because I was able to show and understand what I'm capable of. And so that's the kind of attitude, this resilience, at least the resiliency of looking at it, what could be a negative situation and turning it around and seeing it as something that's ultimately a good experience. It's kind of like just attitude, really. So we all want to be resilient individuals. So how do we do it? So the Davis Finney Foundation had an amazing webinar article several summers ago that teach us how to be more resilient individuals. So we're just going to go through some of these, and Jan, if you want to comment on some of them as well. So how to build resiliency and live well with Parkinson's, which living well with Parkinson's is the Davis Finney Foundation's whole spiel, is how to gracefully live with Parkinson's and make every day a victory. So the first one is get and stay connected.
And that being connected, having Parkinson's often makes people feel embarrassed about themselves. And so they either are embarrassed or out of fear, they don't go places that they should. They need to just be who they are and foster good relationships with those people that they associate with, of course, to help them maintain a positive outlook so that they can feel comfortable in public situations, even when we know there's no hope for a cure at this time. So knowing not to be ashamed and knowing that my life can be just as important and productive as anybody else, that's what Parkinson's people need to keep in their mind, uppermost in their mind.
And then you said earlier, distilling your relationships.
Yes.
and having those meaningful relationships and people that you can trust.
I like that word distilling because it's making something better, more pure. Yeah,
Everybody needs somebody.
I think that's it.
I think it is too. Bill has it in his mind right now. We need to write that one for our gig. All right. So number 2 is take control of what you can take control of, which you feel like in medical training, you have very little control of anything, but you do have some control.
Well, as a professional pianist, I realized quickly that I could not maintain the high level of performance that I always required of myself and that people expected from me. So rather than force something that would not work, I changed my focus. For example, I focused more on my teaching rather than performing. And so that's how I was able to continue for 11 more years after my diagnosis.
And it actually turned into something that multiplied. So instead of being the professional pianist, which she was, but then she also created a program to teach other pianists how to accompany like her, like she does. Just to give you an idea of what she does, your professional grade musician comes into town, and they have 5 pieces of music, major concertos and stuff. And then they just hand it to her and she plays it, sight reads it beautifully, not missing notes, musically. So she was able to make was it a master's program?
Yes, well, they're
Collaborative
offering
piano?
a doctorate now at LSU.
So she created a program at LSU to train people how to do that. So she's multiplied and used this opportunity to multiply.
My successor has been terrific. She's responsible for a lot of the growth, but I got the seed started, so that's great.
All right. So number 3 is adjust expectations. Don't set them too high, don't set them too low, and be flexible.
Right, the same thing with expectations as with being in control. None of us are ever really in control of our lives. And it causes great stress and personal turmoil for us to demand of ourselves the same level of activities we had before our diagnosis. So I lowered my expectations. I take into account that PD is always there. It's the elephant in the room, but you just have to let him be and go about your business.
Number 4 is plan for when you're at your best. So taking time for yourself in the morning, if you have meditation or prayer before you go off to work, taking care of yourself and knowing when you're at your best for different activities. And
yeah, that's basically the life of a person with Parkinson's is planning, always planning when you're taking your medicine on an empty stomach, when you're going to eat. It's just all about planning. And if you're successful, there's a good chance that your life will reflect that with serenity and a fair amount of calm. So you can congratulate yourself if you can do that.
And the last is self-compassion and acceptance. So this is a big one if you're working on homework balance like I am every single day. You might not be able to be the 100% best doctor you can and be the 100% best mom you can. You have to practice self-compassion and acceptance that you're only one person and you can't save everybody and you can't do everything. And so you just have to be forgiving of yourself.
Basically, I have the same thing. We just acknowledge that we have Parkinson's, accept it, and find peace with it. It can't be changed. It's hard to think about it sometimes, but it is what it is. And you just have to not be so hard on yourself. Give yourself leeway. Okay, in closing, I want to say that as with all negative situations, I like to hold out hope for improvement, or at least minimal worsening. And so it is with Parkinson's. I regard my journey through this challenging time as a distillation of who I really am. I have come to know myself so much better since my diagnosis. I can now see what really matters in this life, and I'm filtering out those things and people who do not contribute to my feeling of wellness and happiness. I plan to use every bit of perseverance in my body to stay the course, even when there's little or no evidence of success. For you see, even though there is no cure, Parkinson's has shown me the silver lining. And thus, my life is fuller and more meaningful than it was before my diagnosis. Don't rush to any conclusions about my sanity, please, because it was PD that took me off the stress track and gave me the time to cherish my family and friends, as well as to open new avenues of creativity. So again, I say, I may have PD, but it doesn't have me. And so we're going to end this with when the saints come marching in, feel free to march, dance. We said it would be fun. So.
And I promised I would not say anything, but I have to interject this. This is the ideal example of a duo, musically and medically. The reason they are so artistically successful is that they have to listen to one another in a very focused and high level. And I think Jan has told me several times, she gets the sense that Sarah listens to her when they're talking about medicine. So that's the ideal duo. I just had to mention.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
How much is
Well, I confess there are times when I will just have a good cry. And I can bring it on pretty easily.
I ask this because I know depression is as Dr. Mark said in the past, depression is related to creativity. So maybe that creativity comes from depression is constant.
Mhm, yeah. Although I think I'm less creative when I'm depressed. But yeah, I mean, I have my moments. But when that happens, I try to change my venue, change my locale, change my company into a better frame of mind.
Go shopping.
There's I mean, I've noticed that too, Dara, is that a lot of creative individuals are also depressed too. And you can see that throughout history as well. Some of the best painters and artists. I don't know how that ties in, but I'm sure it does somehow. Yes, Dr. Mariganori.
Well, I've been a neurologist for 35 years, and I spent the first 30 focused on Parkinson's, and I've heard many, many lectures, and that was by far the most entertaining, but also educational. So
Well, thank you.
you all for your
Oh,
contributions
Thank
today.
you so much.
I just wanted to ask, you talked about how Parkinson's creates creativity or brings out creativity in some individuals on the dopaminergic therapies. But I'm wondering, do we know anything about creativity or music as a method of slowing the progression of Parkinson's or improving motor and cognitive function activities, quality of life? Has that been studied?
So the question from Dr. Mariganori is, has it been studied the effect of music in Parkinson's, slowing, delaying disease progression, kind of therapies and whatnot? We didn't focus it on the talk today, but I think there are some studies looking at that. Certainly these collaborations that we showed on some of our slides are looking into that. I know Dr. Birdseal you have some thoughts on that, Dr. Birdseal? I know you have looked into music and at least neurodegenerative conditions. Some music for MCI and dementia studies coming up. But certainly there's music therapy, drum therapy, that sort of thing to improve gait and movement in Parkinson's. And then I think there was something about tango too. There were some studies with tango
Yeah.
from Florida. Yeah.
I personally believe that my practicing every day, I really believe that the piano playing has helped me be where I am today. And yeah, so I mean, I feel like I'm a testimonial to myself about music. Yeah. Bye-bye.
I was wondering if you could comment a bit more about sort of the line or the gray area between having these periods of heightened creativity, maybe from higher dopamine, and then kind of that going. If you don't have sort of factors to be able to say, all right, I'm going to tune out that the curtain is waving every way or something like that, kind of going off the deep end of things. Do you have any sort of things that you notice when you're kind of feeling more creative, how to sort of bring things back in if that's ever a problem for you or anybody, either of you talking?
I don't think it's been a problem for me going off deep end. You mean like excessive creativity? Is that
So
what
the
you're-
question is getting at what side, I guess, the line between obsessing and creating versus just having creativity. And by what I was reading, the line is fine on that. And there are some people who become obsessive with certain activities and will stay up all night. I think, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if your lifestyle permits it. So some of the artistic geniuses will stay up and create things. So it just depends. And I guess the line is drawn based upon what your lifestyle is and if it's getting in the way of what you need to do the next day or your job. So I guess with anything, it would be considered a disorder whenever it disorders your life in some way.
Or do you find like any patients that have Parkinson's and do have some of that creativity, like the feeling of excess dopamine, but have a hard time recognizing if it's like giving me a problem or problem?
So there's the question is when do they have a problem? Like some people have problems kind of obsessive and going past beyond what would be considered normal. And sometimes it is. I have a couple of patients that one of them is kind of into genealogy and stuff. So she'll stay up all night looking up things and you kind of get, they might have other impulsive activities too. I think you're getting at, you kind of ask the question about other impulsive activities too. And then you kind of go, okay, could this be an impulse control issue? And should I lower this patient's dopamine medicines? And so it'll spill over, I think, besides the creative activity into more obsessions and stuff. And so you could probably delineate at that point, say, is it being harmful to the patient or are they just having a good time? So if they're having a good time, it's not harming anyone, including themselves, it's fine. But if it's starting to, make the spouse mad or whatever, you kind of have to say, okay, is this a dysregulation syndrome or something?
So is hyperfocus the right word, and is that a pejorative term?
So is hyperfocus.
Is that a negative thing?
Hyperfocus isn't necessarily negative unless you're, not paying attention to your own self and not bathing and stuff like that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Hyperfocus. I could use that. I could use a little more focus. It was a pleasure playing for y'all this afternoon. Thank y'all very much. Thank you, Bill and Jan, for coming.